Hello. For my field practicum, I was placed on a team that was specifically designated to work with consumers who are stepping down from placement, who are conserved, and stepping back down into the community. The consumers that to work that were chosen for us to work with were consumers that end up in crisis a lot, end up in the hospital, and end up in the locked psychiatric placement. So we've determined that they're a little bit more acute than some of the other clients that we serve. So the client that I wish to talk about today is a 24-year-old male. A little bit of history about him is he first became our client in 2010 when he moved here with his family. Prior to moving here in 2010, he reports that he was first hospitalized at the age of 17. He reports that this is when a girl that he was in love with was killed in a car accident. After he moved to Lake County in 2010, he has been seen by our crisis team 18 times to date. Of those 18 times in crisis, the consumer has been hospitalized 5 times. The consumer became conserved and was placed in 3 different locked psychiatric placement and 2 drug and alcohol rehabilitations. And these drug and alcohol rehabs were by request of the Lake County Behavioral Health and the Public Guardian. The client did not necessarily agree to go. He just went because he was conserved and needed placement and substance abuse treatment. So when this guy came to us, he was moved out of a psychiatric placement, and we moved him into our transitional housing, which for what we have in Lake County is motel vouchers, and immediately we, within a couple of weeks, found him a place to live. While we were looking for a place to live, we all met with him and conducted a strengths-based assessment with him. We went over some of his life domains to see what his needs and wants are in each of his domains. In his family and relationships, we were able to identify that the consumer is the youngest of 4 siblings, and he has 2 sisters and 1 brother. When the consumer was 3, his father passed away. And his brother is deceased as well. And it's important to note that his brother was murdered while he was in jail. Consumer also reported again that he was very upset by the girl being killed in a car accident when he was 17, when he was first hospitalized. The consumer was raised by his stepfather and mother. Consumer's stepfather was physically abusive towards the consumer, and he molested one of his sisters. Consumer's stepfather was an alcoholic. It is suspected, but not reported by the consumer, that the stepfather may have molested the consumer as well. The consumer now has a new stepfather, and he reports to have a good relationship. He also reports to have a good relationship with his mother. So he was able to identify those as his strengths. Although the team has a little bit of concern because both his mother and stepfather like to drink and smoke marijuana with the consumer. The consumer does not have much contact with the other parts of his family. So the consumer had a short-term relationship with another consumer while back in county on our team, and she is now pregnant. There is a possibility that this child is another man's, but this consumer really wants to be a part of this child's life and truly believes that it is his. Currently, though, they are not getting along, but one of his strengths is that he is motivated to obtain some parental rights. For school and occupation, the consumer did graduate high school. He did try to attend a local junior college, but he was ultimately kicked out for making derogatory statements to the dean. The consumer was interested in joining the military, but was also kicked out of their office as well. He identified his strength as having motivation to go to school, but not currently. He knows that he is able to do it, but he wants to work on his substance abuse issues first. Under medical, consumer is legally blind in his right eye, and he identified his strengths as having the resources to be able to have glasses and be able to take care of that issue. For culture, the consumer is a transition in the transitional aged youth. So he's 24. He's a white male. He doesn't report being actively religious, but when you visit him at his home, he has pictures of older family members from old Western times, and he loves to talk about those and tell us the stories about his family. So he seems to really relate to his family that was from old Western times. He also loves to pretend that he's in the Navy. This was actually thought to be a delusion of his for a long time, but I'll get into that a little bit. With us now, he is receiving full service partnership services under the Mental Health Service Act. We have, to the best of our ability, tried to do the Housing First model with him. We have utilized motivational interviewing techniques and solution-focused interventions. And in relation to for a theory for him, I feel that his situation currently is best described by the ecological systems theory. His behavior seemed to change based on his environment, and he is starting to recognize that. So he was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. However, the team right now is questioning this because he has seemed to have developed a trusting relationship with us and has really opened up to us. So his symptoms in the past have been explosive behavior, suicidal behaviors, delusions, paranoia, psychosis, and he had been unable to care for his basic needs. However, the last time that he was in a drug and alcohol center, he was starting to tell people about his time spent in the Navy, and they started to ask him questions and started to call him on whether he was being truthful or not. In the past, staff and placements had believed that he actually believed these and they were delusions of his, but he actually reported to our team that he lies about that and he makes it up just to get a reaction out of people. And he likes the reaction that he gets out of people when he tells them that he's in the Navy. Also, the psychosis that he originally came into our system with was due to substance abuse, and he has admitted to us that he was using bath salts at that time. And if you look back in his chart, there really isn't any other signs of psychosis. So as our team was doing his annual assessment and looking at his diagnosis, we really questioned whether schizoaffective disorder is an appropriate diagnosis. Part of our team is a little bit not really wanting to label a 24-year-old with such a serious diagnosis, and we feel that he may be better suited with a mood disorder such as major depression. He does have suicidal ideation. That is the majority of the times he ends up in our crisis in our ER is because he's reporting being suicidal. The other thing that's interesting about the consumer is that he can be a bully, but he can also be victimized. So in going back to the theory, I do believe that the consumer changes his behaviors based on his environment, and if he feels threatened, he kind of gives in, and if somebody asks for money, he'll give them money, food. He actually had somebody move in on him. But if he feels like he can be in control of the situation, he'll be the bully. And so because of this behavior, because of the bullying behavior, he's not been given the diagnosis of antisocial personality, but they have reported on Access to Lake County Behavioral Health still uses the DSM-4, so we still have the Access system. On Access 2, he has traits of antisocial personality disorder. We're still unclear, we have not seen much behaviors of that, but what we have noticed with this consumer is that he has been out of placement for at least 6 months. He has been dropped from conservatorship. He did remain in housing for a little while, and he was actually evicted. He did not get along well with his neighbors, and he and his mother and father were using substances. And he was also neighbors with the girl that he got pregnant. So the consumer actually decided on his own that he thought he should go to a drug and alcohol treatment, and he did. And that was the first time that he left, because they started questioning him about his lies about being in the Navy. His words was that he was lying. But currently he is now back in rehab because he felt like he was slipping and he couldn't maintain, and asked for the rehab services himself. So he is now back in the rehab, and he seems to be doing fairly well. He has only ended up in crisis a couple of times during the time that he's been out. That has been for suicidal ideation. He has not been hospitalized. We were able to do safety plans with him, and his team was able to work through the issues that were going on with him. He will be being transferred to a new team as our team is coming to a close, and we are hoping that that team will continue trying to do client-centered services with him. We've always been very client-centered and using the motivational interviewing and solution-focused techniques to try and get him to make the decisions and call the shots on his own treatment. And so far it's been beneficial because he has been able to see himself and request services himself that he knew that he needed. Another plus that I had noted is that he was able to be dropped from conservatorship, and so he's no longer on conservatorship. So let's see. One of the things that we like to point with the consumer, this consumer and the consumers on our team, is that we, to the best of our ability, try to practice the housing first model. And we like to point out that it seems as though when we can meet the basic needs of a consumer, they can more easily work on the other behaviors that they are experiencing and doing. So I think that's it, and thank you.